Hi, guys. Hello. What day is it? I was going to say happy whatever day it is, but I genuinely can't even remember. Wednesday, because I had D&D last night and I have D&D tomorrow. Which I think that Wednesday is my day between sessions. But hello! Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, my dudes. Hi, Panda. How are you? I might get a better angle on this. I moved my monitor today. I'm great. How are you? Happy Wednesday. I'm gonna put my sweater back on. I keep my room like 80 degrees and I still need to wear a sweater, apparently. If I can get it on the right arms. Apparently not. Wow. 23, still don't know how to dress myself. That's just the way it is. But hello, I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's been good here. I mean, I actually just got up like a couple of hours ago, but straight up, I'm just nocturnal now. I live on like the opposite schedule. Oh my gosh, my hair is so frizzy. Milkmaid braids today. Or whatever they're called. This is the hairstyle I did for Julius Caesar, but for Pinderus, because I played 2 different roles. I was going to talk about phonetics, because especially with talking about accents and all that fun stuff, especially for D&D, I've been thinking a lot about how to write things in the International Phonetic Alphabet, which we learned that the International Phonetic Alphabet, which we worked on in dialect class. Oh, Panda, I don't broadcast the sessions anymore, so you didn't miss anything. I'm going to put them up on the archive channel. All good. No worries, you didn't miss anything. I don't think we even broadcast the Tuesday campaign. I usually put the Thursday ones up on the channel. On the archive channel. I don't know why I'm yawning. Maybe I should go get some tea or something. But, yeah, it was really fun. We get distracted a lot. I noticed that when I'm editing the VODs of our work. Maybe I should put this. I just did my Duolingo. Thank you for reminding me. That's why you're not going to be able to see the... And the chat's working again. That's nice. Let's see. Is it working in chatting? Okay. I'm just like checking all my windows. Yeah, I think could just be over here, but then you guys will miss the pictures. So, International Phonetic Alphabet. So they actually have like a whole chart over here. It's a long article, but this is like, they use different symbols, and they're still like the Latin letters, but they use different symbols for different sounds. Because, when we speak English, there's a difference. Something might be written with a C, but you don't know whether that means the K sound or the sh or the S sound, or even sometimes the Ch sound. Like in English, our phonemes and our sounds are just super inconsistent. Phone ethics? I wrote phonetics, but we can talk about phone ethics if you want. I'm not sure. I'm great. How are you? Are you feeling better? It's good to see you, Constellation. I do love your name, by the way. I just love the word constellation. It's such a pretty word. Should look at the stars outside. I don't know. Since I've been like nocturnal the last little bit, I have a sun lamp in my room, actually. Like it's a light that's meant to mimic the light of the sun. And because I am not usually out during the day, I keep this on so I still get some like sunlight. And it's probably not as good as like real sunlight, but I don't know. It's been good. I'm trying to make sure I get enough like vitamin D, because I know that it can be not super fun if you don't get enough sunlight. Pig Latin? What do you mean by Pig Latin? Similar to what? Oh man. It yea as hey in bay a yea I'll way int say I a oakspay igpay atenlay. I'm so glad you're feeling better. Pig Latin. I remember my mom having to explain to me what that was. Pig Latin. I want to know, where did that come from? That's an old thing, isn't it? Pig Latin origin. Pig Latin may go all the way back to the time of Shakespeare. It was a medieval language game with accents of the alphabet. So what the International Phonetic Alphabet does, we have this chart here, and each of these symbols, yes, they're Latin letters, but they also mean different sounds. So like I said, a C can mean a lot of different sounds in English, or we might want to differentiate between and ra, because especially when you're doing accents, it's important to make sure you get the little things right, so it can help to be able to write out exactly what the sounds are. And there is one for vowels as well, and it just gets more and more complicated. So, for example, this I is the E sound, and the vowels are based around where they are in your mouth, like where the resonance is and where the sound is produced. So this is the E sound, and this one is the I sound. See, it's when it's spoken, it's not that big of a deal, but trying to write out phonetics is really hard. I always had a hard time with it. I think I needed more practice back in school. Anyway, so for example, if you want to, I think the L's get really complicated. The consonants are based around also where they're produced in your mouth. So if I were to, this is a bilabial unvoiced plosive. So voiceless bilabial plosive is the P sound, like the letter P. But it means, voiceless means that my vocal cords don't vibrate. It's just the air. Bilabial means it uses both lips. Plosive means that you hold air against a seal and then let it out. P, p. Or to do a voiced bilabial plosive is the B sound. So P and B are the exact same movement with your mouth, but one is voiced and one is not. And you can actually feel it. If you put your hand in front of your mouth and then you say B or P, you can feel the difference in the airflow. But it's also in whether your vocal cords vibrate. So these are different ways to describe the way we pronounce particular consonants. So for, say, if we actually spoke English, well, the British accent has also developed over the years, actually. If we were to, okay, my Old English is pretty rusty, but we'll give it a shot. So English as a language, let's look at some of the developmental stages of English. What we speak now is modern English. If you look at Shakespeare, which was centuries ago, that was known as early modern English, because believe it or not, English used to be, it's really hard to read for people who speak modern English. So let's look up some Middle English. And it was pronounced differently. The vowels changed over the years. So my pronunciation is not going to be the most accurate. I'm not an expert in historical pronunciation of English, but I am very interested in the history of English. So if we're going to look at, here we go. So we speak modern English now. And now we can look at Middle English, which was spoken from about the 10th or the 11th or 12th century to about the 15th century. So you're going to see that in things like the Canterbury Tales. Like, that would be right at the end of it. So if you look at Chaucer, let's look at the Canterbury Tales and how it's written. I'm going to find a text of the Canterbury Tales. Chaucer! Here we go. The Canterbury Tales. BritishLibrary.uk. Thank you. BL.uk. Where's the manuscript? Oh, this is like the illuminated manuscript. That's the... I just want the text. Harvard. Okay, the general prologue. So let's look at this. This is the general prologue, and it has a translation. Thank you, Harvard. It has a translation of how we would say it today. But if we're looking at Middle English, when that April with his shores soot, the draught of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in sweet, is it sweet? Liquor? No abbreviations. Well, not necessarily. There has been slang as long as there has been language. Language develops over time, but people actually, I think, used a lot of acronyms back then. This is a written text, so this was like a poem, kind of. So it probably would have less slang and abbreviation. But if we can find, if we want to look for like a letter written in that time, so let's look, let's see, who was, I bet I can find something from a monarch. British monarch. Letters from, like, I mean, I guess they wouldn't be British. Who was the King of England? I have to look that up. Who was the King of England, or one of the kings of England, when when this would have been spoken? And we can, I would figure that we could look up some of their letters, because they're probably the ones who have had their letters preserved. So let's look up, like I said, this would have been around the 11th or 12th century to about the 15th. So we are going to scroll past the House of Wessex, the House of Denmark, the House of Godwin, and into like the 12th century. So we're going to get, Eleanor of Aquitaine. I almost forgot she was this. So let's look up, let's find Henry III, the House of Plantagenet. Let's see if we can find any letters from Henry III. Written in Old English, was written by someone learning. Kind of, because, you know, before spelling was standardized, before we had the printing press, people would just kind of write whatever they wanted. Now we have more standardized spelling, and it's still ridiculous. But back in the day, people just spell stuff however they wanted. Okay. Letters of King Henry III. So if we can find some of the original texts of, say, Henry III's letters, because, this has Latin in it, so we'll see. Oh, this is written in Latin. This is not helpful. Emoji. I mean, people have also been using pictures as characters since at least ancient Egypt. But the printing press. Yeah, Johannes Gutenberg done nothing but trouble, that man. Welcome to. Why do I have to log in? I just want to read a letter. Okay, wow. Is this all written in Latin? We can read Latin, but that's not going to be helpful. They probably would have used ecclesiastical Latin back then, and I prefer classical Latin, because I think, it's called vulgar Latin, but it's not actually vulgar. It just refers to the Latin that was spoken by the common people. Okay. Why do I have to have an account? So these are from, like, the 13th century, which there is no essays to, like, figure out the cookies. There we go. All right, where is his letter? Because these are going to probably be I can just find a transcript. This is going to probably be some of the letters that would have most often been preserved. I wish we could see letters from people who were maybe more common, but the thing is, people weren't as literate back then. That was why, one of the reasons anyway, that the printing press was such a big deal, was because it allowed everyone to have access to books. Because before that, this one's Henry VIII, but that's not helpful because we're looking for Henry III. Hello, Melkor, how are you? We're talking about Old English and the way that the language has developed throughout the years. There we go. So I'm trying to find a transcript of some letters from the time when Middle English would have been spoken, which was the stage before our modern English. Well, you know, the stage is in between, but there was Old English, there's Middle English, and there's Modern English. So, here we go. You can buy this one. Wow. Let's crowdsource an original Henry III letter. Yeah, that's the problem. A lot of them, even though they were monarchs, are not preserved. So a lot of it is just trying to find resources, because, you know, I'm not exactly in the United Kingdom archives. how our conversations would go. Got a very old, ooh, how old? I have one that was supposedly published in like the early 1900s, but it's a medical dictionary, so the Dark Ages. Yes, that's true. The French was like the language of the aristocracy, and that's why actually we have different words for different kinds of meats, for example, why we say pork instead of pig, beef instead of cow when we're talking about the meat, because the common people would talk about the animals as the animals because they usually couldn't afford meat. And so the word cow comes from the more Germanic roots because the common people spoke English. But beef comes from the French word. So because the aristocracy who spoke French were the ones who were mostly eating the meat of these animals, that's why we have different names for their meats versus the actual creature. This is a paper written in French. So maybe Henry III did not have a lot of these. Let's go to his son, or to his successor, Edward I. But that is a good point, Cosme. Ooh, maybe this one. Have I ever thought about being a teacher? I have thought about it. I don't know how I do. It's a lot of work. Being a teacher is hard, for sure. Okay. Ordering and viewing options. I'm not in England. Don't you have these scanned National Archives? Because this is like, sometimes they have them scanned, and sometimes sometimes you have to like actually request them, and I am not in England, sadly. So let's see. Transcript. Here we go. Oh, this is King Edward IV. So that's not helpful. We're trying to find letters from like the 13th century because that's when Middle English would have been spoken. So we may not be able to find examples of abbreviations or slang at the moment, but like I said, this is the Canterbury Tales. This is the text of the introduction. And this words were spelled very differently back then, and honestly, were just kind of however you wanted to do it before spelling was standardized, before like the vowels all shifted. If we look, where is my Shakespeare? I could look up the text on the internet, but I like to read the original. Okay, so here is The Tempest. This is The Tempest by William Shakespeare. I don't think this is the original text though. So, you know what? I'm going to need the first folio version of one of these. I don't have The Tempest, but I do have The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, because we just did it in school. More than 1,000 years? Really? I can't believe that either. That's a really long time to live. Who was it that ruled that long? Where is my Julius Caesar script? Is this it? Nope. That has page protectors. They just gave us like the whole first folio, and we got to figure that out. It was super fun. So you know what? I'm just going to pull up the text online so that you guys can see it too. So let's look up first folio. Let's look up Hamlet, because I like Hamlet. I know it's cliche, but Hamlet is my favorite Shakespeare play. Oh, that rhymes! Anyway, so one way that we know that Shakespeare was pronounced differently back then is because Shakespeare wrote often in verse, right? So it's supposed to rhyme. And with our current pronunciation, sometimes it rhymes, sometimes it doesn't. But if you're going to use, I'm going to attempt the original dialect. I have not been formally educated in this. I'm just really into dialects, so I might be super wrong. Which king was it, Panda? I'd be very interested in that, because I don't know of any humans that have lived that long. Do you remember who it was? All right. So the first folio means like the first, these writings of it. So we're going to look, you can still see a lot of the influence of Latin in this text. So this is Act 1, Scene 1. So, but he's saying, give you good night. But this you right here is because in Latin, the U and the V weren't always different. If you're speaking classical Latin, which, do I have any Latin texts? We just had those Latin things. Here's my Latin textbook. So, if we're gonna look at Latin, if I were to read, do we have any text here? The V in Latin, at least in classical Latin, is pronounced U. So if I were to say, the phrase veni vidi vici, the way that most people pronounce it is actually the way that they pronounce it in ecclesiastical Latin, the Latin used by the Catholic Church, etc. In classical Latin, it would have been veni, vidi, vici. But that, I don't know, that sounds a little more awkward to me. Maybe it's just because I'm not used to it. So a lot of people prefer ecclesiastical Latin because that's what's often used. What people often hear, because one of the last entities that uses Latin is the church. Anyway, so let's find like a good manual of this. Well, that's not true about the Catholic Church using Latin. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not Catholic. But it's mostly a dead language. I'm going to look for another part so we can have like a good monologue. Ooh, this is a long play. But, there we go. Okay. I want to find one of Ophelia's monologues, just because I really like Ophelia. Ophelia's like a dream role for me. Not gonna lie. This is Hamlet's whole thing with the ghost. Alright, let's look at the ghost monologue. I think this is Hamlet. Whose monologue is this? I can't even see it. Okay, yep, this is the ghost. So, back then, the accent, at least of the common people, was, maybe closer to Scottish. I will try and pronounce it. But, you know, you can come to your own conclusions. And again, I'm not, like, formally trained in this. I just have looked into it a little bit because I thought it was really cool. The Roman pronunciation. Well, yes, obviously there is, we don't know exactly how it would have been spoken, but from what we understand, classical Latin was spoken differently than ecclesiastical Latin. But you're right, we haven't gone back in time and actually listened to the way it was spoken. But from the way scholars have analyzed texts and historians have seen like how language has changed over time, that is what we understand for how classical Latin was pronounced. But you're right, we have not gone back in time. Okay, is this in verse? Because there are two types of, like, writing that Shakespeare uses. There's going to be verse, and there's going to be prose. So verse and prose are different, and also the way that the meter in Shakespeare is, and the way which words are accented, actually tells you quite a bit about the character. We took a whole class on it in college. It was really cool. Here we go. I'm going to try and find one that actually rhymes. Because that'll be easier to understand. So usually the ones who spoke in verse are like the royalty. So let's look at to be or not to be. Yes, that is. I'm trying to remember if that one's in verse. Because, like I said, the prose and the verse are two different things, and they're spoken maybe by characters who are like of a particular rank, whereas prose might be spoken by someone that's supposed to be portrayed as a commoner. There's a lot more in Shakespeare than just the text. Okay. This one, I think. That might work. So this is Polonius talking to the king. King, what's his name? Claudius. So the king is asking, the king and Polonius have been plotting to try and figure out what is going on with Hamlet by sending Ophelia in to, like, try and spy on him. Because Hamlet and Ophelia, if you didn't know, they kind of have a thing. And him and Horatio kind of have a thing. You know, Hamlet's just a player. Okay. So there's this little verse here. Doubt thou the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. So move and love is they're gonna rhyme. Today they don't rhyme. Love, move, they don't rhyme there. But this verse does. So that's a letter, actually, I think, that Hamlet wrote to Ophelia, and Polonius is showing the king. This in obedience hath my daughter shewed me, and more above hath his soliciting, as they fell out by time, by means and place, all given to mine heir. And the king says, but how hath she received his love? And Polonius says, what do you think of me? Because Polonius is kind of a suck-up. He's like... He and the king are plotting the whole time, and Polonius is just really excited that the king is paying attention to him. And the king says, as of a man, faithful and honorable. And Polonius says, I would fain prove so. But what might you think? When I had seen this hot love on the wing, as I perceived it, I must tell you that before my daughter told me what might you, or my dear, my majesty, that's another example of that Latin, the Latin I versus J, in just like the V and the U in Latin, I and J were kind of a thing. That's one reason that the word hallelujah, that has a J in it, but it makes the Y sound, which is, again, how it probably was in classical Latin. If our first fluent language wasn't English, but of a different foreign country, and other foreign countries, I mean, I guess that's how it is in countries that don't speak English as their first language. Because, I don't know, I'm a native English speaker. Anyway, so that's Shakespeare. But this is early modern English, believe it or not. This is part of modern English. And these are, most of the words in Shakespeare are words that you'll recognize. You know, I would fain prove so, but what might you think? You can understand what they're saying there. There are some words that are probably going to be harder for us to understand, especially because Shakespeare made up words. And also because we don't understand the cultural context behind them. I don't know if I can find another example of that. I'll have to look for that, because there are going to be a lot of jokes that would have only made sense to a Shakespearean audience that nowadays go right over our heads because we don't have that same cultural context. For the same reason that, you know, when I say something like yeet to throw something, you're not going to understand that unless you have the cultural context around the word yeet. Unless you've seen the Vine and seen all the memes about it, you're probably not going to understand that yeet means, like, I'm throwing something. I'm trying to think of more examples of slang. Either way, it's a whole thing. And slang, I think, becomes part of the zeitgeist faster than ever before because of social media. English, oh, of course English goes back farther than Shakespeare. English goes back a long time. Couple thousand years. I mean, so English is a Germanic language. And before it kind of started to be a thing, we can blame, like, the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans a little bit for this. But English is primarily based in the Germanic languages of, like, early Western Europe. So if we want to look at, we can actually look at this. There's a dictionary. I love this dictionary. Proto-Germanic is the language that was spoken way back then before the Germanic languages all split off like they have now. So if you look at languages like English, German, Dutch, what's the other one? That starts with an F. I'll remember it at some point probably. But those are Germanic languages. They're similar in structure, in earlier phonetics. So let's look at Proto-Germanic. Let's see if I can find any text in Proto-Germanic. I do not know the dialect for this one at all, and I don't think we have it. Obviously, this is a reconstructed language. We've taken roots of common words between these languages and been able to kind of reconstruct how it might have sounded. So, they also were they were not written in the Latin alphabet as we have it today. They were written in runes. They didn't have the letters that we use. So they had different sounds that made, that were different characters. So if we're going to look at, let me find it. I'm going to find an example of some text. Even, I would not say to cavemen that far. Here we go. I would not say to cavemen. Cavemen were, I mean, depending on what you mean by cavemen, they probably did have some kind of proto-language, and even the Neanderthals probably had some kind of language. The grammar was probably a lot simpler, and they may not have had, they probably didn't have a need for the amount of vocabulary that we have today, because, you know, their society was, I don't want to say simpler, because they were processing as much of the information that we process today, just in different ways, and about different things. So I'm going to find some Proto-Germanic text. Here's one. And, oh, lovely. It has a translation. So let's look at this. So this is, this is from the 8th century. So this is probably the 700s. And this is how Proto-Germanic was written on this piece. And here's a translation into the Latin letters. The languages exist that either are or are almost... I know, me too. How do you lose a whole language, but no one's speaking them? Especially as our world becomes more and more consolidated. Languages just die out because people stop speaking them. And especially, it didn't really help that, like, a lot of the English-speaking world... sorry about that. A lot of the English-speaking world decided to colonize places and make people speak English. So things like Gaelic, when Ireland got invaded and they were like, you're going to speak English now, not a lot of people kept speaking Gaelic. But these letters here are the same. Why does this have borders on it? The Mayan and the Inca verbiage for, do we? As far as I know, our English names for the months mostly come from the Romans. Although, I mean, a lot of societies have had sort of a 360-ish cycle. I believe it was the ancient Egyptians as well, who believed in, like, they had 360 days, and then they had, like, 5 other days, and they had a myth around that. Anyway, so if we look at this is Proto-Germanic. So this is what would have been the proto-language before English, before Dutch, before German. And this was spoken, well, by a bunch of different Germanic tribes, by people who lived in what is now Scotland and England. And, anyway, so this is, so this is sort of a more Latin translation. If you're going to look, this is a thorn. This is a letter that we in English don't really use anymore. You can still see it in, like, Icelandic, but it makes the th sound or the th sound. So like a th. And that was this was, I think, the th sound, and this is also a thorn and was the th sound. But I'm gonna have to double check that because I'm not sure. I have to copy and paste these letters. There we go. Yeah, that one that kind of looks like a B with a tail is the th sound, and the one that kind of looks like a backward 6 is the th sound, like a th. And that's how it's pronounced in in Icelandic as well. So, there we go. So those are some letters that we don't use anymore. Oh, that was the other example texts. So, if I were going to say you are in Proto-Germanic, obviously this is a little theoretical, but as far as we know, the translation would be thu is. Probably is. And you can see that actually in the way that English developed. If we look at words like thou, you can see how that might have developed from thu. Thu, thou. Or that is to say are. It may not have been conjugated the same way, but I am, ek, im. And that's, how do you say that in, what's German? Ich. That's what it is. My favorite part about learning about history, I love thinking about the people that might have lived the things that we're learning about, that spoke this language, who lived the stories that we hear in our history classes. It fascinates me to think that there were so many people before us and they lived these full lives and these were just natural to them. Like this was just normal. Like they just spoke this language because that's what they grew up speaking. That's crazy. Oh, and this is, you can see this in German. Today, they are would be sie sind. You can see that right here. Sie sind. Ist. So in German, if I were going to say, he is happy, ist glücklich. Glücklich, cannot do that glottal sound right now. Would be different. It's not is, but you can still see the ist. Ist. And then, obviously in different languages, in different locations, the dialects would have varied, especially now, like, we have the internet, so we can hear each other speak very easily. But back then, if you lived in one place, everyone in that area was probably going to develop their own little habits, and that language was going to develop on its own. Kind of the same way that even though people in America and England both speak English, we have different words for different things, and we say different words in different ways, and that's not just the dialect. If someone were going to, if I were in England and someone told me, oh, there's a petrol station right down there. Petrol. In the United States, I call that like a gas station. Actually, in England, they might even say garage. It used to be that maybe the swear words that we use today were probably a lot more offensive like several decades ago. But nowadays, offensive language, like what actually offends people, is changing. Back 100 or 2 years ago, words that might have meant a particular race that I'm not going to say were a lot more common and accepted. And nowadays, we know that it is very offensive to call someone words like that. So the way that not only the way that we speak language, but the way that we understand and interpret language changes all the time, especially with society. Another word that we don't really use in the United States is mad. We use mad often to mean angry. Like, you mad, bro? In the UK, it more often means insanity. Like, oh, she went mad. Which, it's changed over time in the UK versus the United States, because our languages have developed separately because of all this geographical distance. Here we go. This, yes, the Mad Hatter. They don't mean that he's angry. They mean that he is cuckoo. This is, the word television. I've never heard someone in the United States use the word telly. Although in the audiobook that I'm narrating right now, one of the British characters uses the word telly. And I was like, oh! This is another example of that I dialect. Guy from the TV license, spelled differently, chapped my uncle's pal's door. And he told them he didn't have a telly. Chapped. I actually don't know what this word means. Like, being American, from context, I can imagine that maybe it means he knocked on the door. Which came first, the fruit, orange, or the color? I believe it was the fruit. But I could be wrong. I believe it was the fruit. Yeah, I think it was the fruit. And the guy was like, "You've got an aerial on your roof." Aerial probably means like a satellite. I'm guessing all this from context. So if anyone here is Scottish, please correct me. Got it. Oh no. Thank you for watching. Are we considered aliens? Or I just saw that. Are we considered aliens? Or how did we inhabit this planet? Well, if we think about, I mean, there are a lot of different theories. Some people would say we're aliens, but there are a few different theories as to how humans came about. Most of the theories I've heard are that we evolved over billions of years. But amino acids, yes. So the way that I think the prevailing theory at the moment, from what I understand, again, I majored in theater. I'm not an expert in any of this, so if you are and you have more education, please let us know because I want to have correct information. Primordial soup. Yes. So the idea that the first cell, probably before that, we needed more building blocks. So a cell is just basically a bunch of genetic material in an oily, fatty envelope, different from the virus envelope. But to form DNA, amino acids and such chained up, and different elements came together in bits. Just, yes, exactly. And the water back then was warmer and covered more of the earth, so it was kind of just a nice spot for life to form. But it still took a really long time. Anyway, so he said, "I've got a pint of milk in the fridge. Doesn't it mean I've got a coo out the back? Cow," and shut the door. Reject fraternity. Embrace tradition. I am going to go float in the ocean like the first cells. Like, what's Luca? Last universal common ancestor. I was meant to float in the ocean and wash up on shore. Anyway. So yeah, that's Scottish. And you can see how it developed differently than the way that the language developed in Britain. What were we looking up? Proto-Germanic. We were talking about Middle English. History in this life cycle would repeat itself once we're gone. Like, would dinosaurs return to rule the planet? That's an interesting thought. I don't know if it would be dinosaurs. I think... So, the way that, like, mammals first got control of the planet... So we had, like, the age of dinosaurs... And then we had the extinction, the Chicxulub asteroid, and also things were kind of going bad environmentally for the dinosaurs anyway, weren't they? The reason mammals survived was because we, back then, at that point, were mostly teeny little rodents, and we didn't need much food to stay alive because we were small. Dinosaurs needed a ton of food to stay alive because they were huge. Basically, well, most of the time, creatures in the deepest part of the sea have a weird thing going on, but we're talking about land animals. Generally, the bigger you are, the more calories you need to just stay alive. So the dinosaurs were huge, and they had to eat a ton of food. And then, when the Chicxulub asteroid thing hit and all the plants were dying out, all the herbivores died out because they needed a ton of food. And then all the big herbivores were dead, so the carnivores starved because they needed a ton of food. So, yeah, exactly. If we were thinking about aliens, I mean, they may not even look like what we consider life. We're carbon-based. Aliens may very well be silicon-based. They could be based around a different element entirely. They might not even communicate in a register that we can even sense. You know, we speak. We have language. We speak by pulling in air to our lungs and then using our diaphragm and our lungs to push it back out. And then we have these highly specialized vocal cords. It's the same reason that other primates probably wouldn't be able to speak. The art of... That was yesterday? No, I didn't see it. Oh no, I forgot. Oh my gosh. I'll have to find, I forgot. Oh no. Oh, that looks cool though. Look at that. Why is this down so low? Thank you for the ads, CNN. There we go. Look at that. Oh! I wonder if we've started getting, like, information back from it yet. I have so many tabs open now. I picked the right one! Yes, we only know of life on one planet, and that's us. Which is a huge problem for trying to find extraterrestrial life. Because, like I said, they may not communicate in a way that we even understand. And that's one answer to the Fermi paradox, is that we have reached out, and they have reached out, but they don't understand that we've reached out with, like, radio signals, because maybe they communicate through colored lights. Or maybe they communicate through something different entirely. What if they communicate only through pheromones like ants? Hi, Ripjaws! How are you? Good to see you. We're talking about aliens now. I've decided to call these, like, tangents because I may have started talking about phonetics, but now we're talking about aliens. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. They could be based in a different element entirely. They may not even look like the animals we consider. Like, we don't know. If life developed independently on another planet, it may have developed in an entirely different way. So, we really have no idea if we were gonna reach out. And honestly, that's one that I think about a lot. Considering the age of the universe and how long our planet has, barring any man-made apocalypse, I would say as a race, we would likely advance enough to explore much, much further. I hope so. I think it would, like, bind us as a species, but also I do worry about, like, historically, humans have, like, colonized the heck out of anywhere we find. So I hope by the time we discover extraterrestrial life, we do, like, cooperate and are nice to each other. But also, who knows if they would be nice to us? Like, for all we know, we haven't heard from anyone else because they're scared. Because they're all, like, trying to be quiet because maybe there's a much greater threat out there in the universe, and we humans don't even know it, so we're just, our whole planet is screaming and screaming and screaming into space. And that might, like, be kind of a bad idea. Anyway, Middle English. I wrote a paper on the Fermi paradox. I got a C. I think I've told you guys that story. To be fair, I had no idea how to write a technical paper. Yes, exactly. Maybe all the aliens, they hear our planet, like, sending out radio signals as fast as we can and, like, throwing satellites out into space. Find us! Who's out there? We're so lonely! And the other aliens are like, shut up! They'll hear you. It is, yeah. They're, I think most of these are like Fermi paradox solutions. Shh, they'll hear you. Wow. Yeah, that one, I find that one a little bit creepy. Yeah. So who knows if we would even be able to talk to them or communicate with them or recognize them as life. Like Stonehenge and... I mean, I think we can replicate that engineering process, can't we? They would be big projects. I don't think we would want to do them today. But, I mean, I think we know how the pyramids were built. Don't we? Am I misinformed? Because I think that we could replicate it. We just don't. How that was all actually made. When it comes to, like, wonders of the world. I mean, mostly it was slavery. That was pretty much how it was built. The pyramids was slavery. I mean, they had paid workers, too. Yeah, exactly. Physically, we could do it. I don't think we'd want to, is the thing. Because, like, why would we want to replicate the pyramids? We already have them. Yeah, slavery. A lot of civilizations have been built on the backs of slaves, including the United States. Humans have been enslaving other humans. I mean, for a long time. I mean, it makes sense. It's probably not. Morally, it's not great. But it makes sense to the monkey brain, like, oh, if I can just get a bunch of other people to do this work for me, yeah, it would, was that hundreds of years? It would be a long time. Pyramids, I think they had, I know that they had some paid workers, but I thought there was also slavery involved. But I could be wrong. What was I looking up? Pyramids? Let's look it up. How were the pyramids built? Oh! Really? It was paid workers! Apparently the consensus today among Egyptologists is that, they were built by paid workers who, farmed the rest of the year, but when they couldn't farm, they would build those. Wow. Yeah, I think you're right. I thought that, it was slaves, but I think you're right. I know that we have uncovered, like, letters and stuff and records of how the workers were paid, so I knew at least some of them were paid, but, I think you're right. They were not built by slaves. Yeah, it's, Herodotus said that it was slavery, but also he was writing like thousands and thousands of years after the fact. And so he probably didn't see it. But yeah, it looks like they were paid workers, probably people who farmed for most of the year, and then while the Nile and the other rivers were flooding, they needed to find other work because they couldn't farm because it was flooding. So they built that then. It was like seasonal work. Now we have that retail during the Christmas season. Interesting. And I think they actually, like, we do also have evidence that they, like, went on strike for better pay. Yeah, it was a really, really long time ago. It was thousands and thousands of years. So, until we get a time machine, we probably won't know for sure, unfortunately. But we do our best. What was I looking up? I still have all these tabs open. We were talking about Middle English. Ancient Egypt, we were talking about hieroglyphs, the way that they wrote, which they were not. I mean, writing developed independently in a few different areas, I think. But the Egyptians had their hieroglyphs, which eventually came to represent different sounds. And usually, like the word for a particular thing, they would just draw a picture of the spoken word, and that was meant to be read as like the first phoneme of that word. So let's look that up. Hieroglyphs. Is it hieroglyphics? What's the difference? I guess hieroglyphics is the name of the language, and a hieroglyph is the writing. So let's find, we're pronouncing some of this. Hieroglyphic. No, I don't want to know how to pronounce the word hieroglyphics. I want to see some hieroglyphs. I think hieroglyphics is the language, hieroglyphs are the characters. Ancient Egypt probably didn't have like the exact same sounds we do today. Their language was pronounced differently. I think they also wrote without vowels most of the time. Let's see. So if we are going to look at, oh, this is Pinterest. Love that. If we're going to look up the way that like different sounds were pronounced. Oh, that's nice. I'm trying to find like a good table for you guys to be able to see. So that we would know how to actually say it. They have different, like we have our A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obviously, they didn't have like an equivalent. These were, as we see the letter A, and we know it can say ah or ah, they would have had letters that were better suited for their language. So if we look at this one, they have the ah sound. This would be the ah. This is probably more like e or ah, something a little bit higher in the mouth. Oh wait, this isn't even. This is ah. This is ah. So that's a shorter version. And some languages, you actually see this in Tolkien's Elvish. And that's not even a real language. It is to me. The way that the length that you hold the vowel also makes a difference. So this is a sound that we don't really have in English, but it's pronounced, it's like a glottal, what's the word? Is this a glottal fricative? Ka. Ka. Or k. So there's Scottish loch and German ich. Loch is right here at the soft palate. Loch, ich. And that's our velar fricative. I think it's a fricative. I always mix up fricatives versus like the trills and stuff. A real No, I steal a lot from Tolkien Elvish for my D&D games. Anyway, so this k sound, it's not a k, k is pronounced here, your hard palate, in the velum, k, 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 and that one's back here. So the place that the sound comes from in your mouth can change throughout a lot of languages. And that's why, to me, oral posture usually makes a big difference in the accent. So when I'm speaking in my accent right now, most of the vibration is right here in my hard palate and just in this area of my face. But when I speak in that the Irish accent that we were talking a little bit ago, it's more up here, and kind of the same thing with the Minnesotan accent. It's more up here with my molars. British, like I've said before, RP is in the front of my mouth. It's all about oral posture, at least for me. That's how I tend to learn accents. This would be the j sound, the ch sound. And we have different symbols for that in the International Phonetic Alphabet. Breathy H, so probably the and I'm placing that back in my throat. So, obviously, we don't know exactly how they spoke, but this is our approximation. So if we're looking at the International Phonetic Alphabet, all these sounds make different ones. All these sounds make different ones. Yes, thank you, Captain Obvious. So a nasal sound is one that ends in the nose. The air comes out through your nose. If you plug your nose, doesn't come out. I mean, it does a little bit, but not very much. And these are the places where they are said in the mouth. So, bilabial. I use both my lips. This is a non-sibilant fricative. So a sibilant fricative is like a s sound. Sibilants is s. Non-sibilant fricatives are fricative, but that are not the s sound. There's no hiss. So if we look at this, the voiceless velar fricative. We just talked about this sound in the hieroglyphs. The hieroglyphs. This is the h sound. Loch. And you can see it. There are examples of where these sounds are used. So in English, we don't have it in the American dialect, but loch, loch. That's the h sound in Irish and Scottish dialects. So it's a fricative is basically where the air comes through, but it is blocked or changed by something in your mouth. This velar, the velum here, which is kind of like the back of your hard palate. Bilabial, b, lips, two lips. Labiodental, v, one lip and your teeth. Linguolabial is your tongue and your lips. So if we're going to look at, I don't even remember what this sound is, but let's do linguolabial plosive. The. At least I think that's right. It's the sound. So you use your tongue and one lip and you put air behind it, and then you let it out. Dental, alveolar, and postalveolar. Dental, teeth. Means you do it with your teeth. Alveolar, that's this bit back here behind your teeth. The alveolar ridge. If you put your tongue on your hard palate and then you find this little ridge here, that's your alveolar ridge. And that's where you're making these sounds. So t, d, t, and d are the same mouth movement, just with different amounts of air. One is voiced, one is not. And that's a plosive. So I put my tongue right here, my alveolar ridge, t, t, d, d, and put air behind it, let it out. Same as the p and b sounds, but in a different part of my mouth. So if we're going to look, an approximant, I'm going to have to remember what this is, the y, I think that's, it's like the pieces of your mouth that are making the sound get close, so the air is changed, but they don't completely block it off. So the y sound, y, y. Your tongue gets close to the roof of your mouth, y, but it doesn't stop the sound. A trill is, it's a trill, or the alveolar trill, or not the bilabial trill, or this alveolar trill, uvular trill. This one's hard to do. That's gonna be back here in your throat where the uvula is. We don't have that sound in English. I don't think. Let's look. And so this is the voiceless. So there's a voice and a voiceless. The voiceless would be, and the voice would be. That is a fun sound to make. Okay, this is not used. I guess it is used in some places in English. Coming into. Imagine like coming into a Twitch stream tagged educational, and the person on camera is just going. the voiced uvular trill. I can't do it without laughing, I'm sorry. Okay. A tap. A tap is where the articulator hits it quick and then stops. So ra ra ra. The uvular and glottal sounds are the most fun. Okay. So these taps and flaps are gonna be let's look at this one. Voiced retroflex flap. And it does have examples here. So I'm gonna make sure that I guess we don't have that in English. So that's gonna be retroflex. It's like back here. The tip, I'm gonna have the tip of my tongue up. And it's behind my alveolar ridge. So let's hear I'm gonna try it and then we'll hear the example and see if I do it right. Ra, 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 ra. Well, let's see. So let's see if...
Ra, ara.
Oh, ra, ara, ra, ra, ra. I placed that, in front of my alveolar ridge, I guess, so. But that's the same as this trill. You're just using... Actually, that's one reason that, trills are really good vocal warm-ups, because they take a lot of air to push that sound through. If you're doing, like... You're gonna have to use your breathing muscles properly, because it takes so much air pressure to make your lips vibrate like that. Same with the... Those are the warm-ups I do. So let's look at these sibilant fricatives. Dental. It's this sound. Wow, this one has a long article. Why does this not say American? Is this different? I guess it's... Maybe it's a softer version? Sink. Yep, it's this sound. S. That's not how I say it. A type of fricative consonant pronounced with the tip or blade. So you got the tip, you got the blade, and then you have the body of the tongue. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. The dorsum? We had to learn all this in dialects class, and apparently I didn't retain half of it. So just behind the teeth, this alveolar ridge. Because I make this sound without, like, touching the tip. The blade, I have the blade of my tongue, the part behind the tip, right here at the same ridge, so at my teeth. S, s, z, z. Same mouth movement, different amounts of air, because your vocal cords are moving for one of them. S, s, v, z, z. I said the wrong sound. Is this a sound? This one's one we don't have in English either. Voiceless alveolar retracted sibilant. Okay, I gotta figure out how to say this. This is cool. Or not. I guess I can't click on that. It's the sh sound, because I know the sh sound has like a bigger S in this table. I was also still on the wrong page. Love that. So the sh is I would say that's a fricative, because it's partially obstructed. And it's sh. I would probably say that's postalveolar, maybe. Oh, here it is. Sibilant fricative. The sh and the zh sounds. So this is sh. This is zh. I don't know if we even have that in English. Oh, we do. Vision. The zh sound versus the sh sound. The glottal ones, we don't get as many of those. The glottal plosive. So, like b and d, you're going to gather air and then you're going to release it in the glottis. So that means in your throat. So that would be la, la, La. That's kind of a sound you might hear in like Klingon if you like Star Trek. A glottal stop is where you cut it off in the glottis. So if I were to be speaking and I were to say you can hear my throat close off. And so that matters to some languages. Like Klingon is the one that comes to mind, but I'm pretty sure there are some non-fictional languages that use it as well. The glottal stop just means that you like close off your throat. Always wanted to learn Klingon. I used to speak a fair bit of Klingon, but I have forgotten it over the years. So the ones back here, these are the laryngeal sounds because they're back in the larynx. Oh, and that's a perfect example. Sto, va, kor. I don't know if I'm getting the roticity right, but sto, that little, what's it called? The apostrophe in Klingon means glottal stop. Sto, va, kor. We don't talk about Klingon. Voiceless uvular fricative. Is that the... That one just sound like a cat with a hairball. Versus that sound is in is velar, uvular. Non-sibilant. What is this one? Voiceless bilabial fricative. Oh, that's f, isn't it? We don't use that in English, but it's the f. Bilabial, f. Voiceless, no sound, fricative. My lips are obstructing it a little bit, but not quite. Like you're blowing out a candle. History. What's it about? Aliens. How did they move those 100-ton stones? Let's look. A team of researchers has determined how the stones got into the Forbidden City in Beijing. Oh, the palace were... Oh, they didn't... I guess they didn't have wheels. The palace, once home to the emperors of China, this Forbidden City, was built by sliding the giant stones on ice. That's interesting. That's cool. Thank you. Yeah, they would take these gigantic stones and they would pull them on ice with like sleds, and they would dig wells every so often to get more water, and then they would pour that on the ice to make it slipperier so it would be easier to pull the stones over it. That's cool. And they would, if they pulled it fast, when they pulled water over it, the water wouldn't yet freeze. And that would make it even easier for them to pull. That's cool. So let's find a picture. This is one of the boulders. Minecraft? Life imitates art. Everything is Minecraft. So this is one of the biggest ones that they carved. That's cool. They would pour water on the ice. They would dig wells. That sounds exhausting. That's like so much work. But I guess when you're like the emperor of China, you can do pretty much whatever you want. We can look at... Now, Chinese is interesting. Well, I say Chinese. Chinese is a group of languages. There are a bunch of different dialects that today are often called separate languages, different things between like Cantonese and Mandarin. Those are pretty widely spoken. But the thing about most of these Chinese languages, so we've got a bunch of different varieties of Chinese. And there are a bunch of different dialects spoken in different ways in different areas. Let me make sure I have this right. So here are the different groups. And you can't even see that. Love it. These are the different groups of the Chinese languages. Mandarin is, I think, the most widely spoken first language in the world. And you can see in this graph, which I'm covering up, so I will click on it, or just move my camera. This graph here, more than half of the people who speak Chinese as a first language speak Mandarin as their first language. But the cool thing about a lot of these Chinese dialects is that they have a tonal aspect to them. So how you say the word is going to make it different. Whether you take the tone and lift it, ah, or go up and then down, ah. Yeah, language in China has some crazy history of their languages and just crazy history in general. Oh, another link. Unraveling the mystery behind the megalithic stone walls of Sacsayhuaman. I think I'm saying that right. So these walls, the stones were cut to fit together. So they're cut so perfectly they fit together like a puzzle. And they fit together so tightly that people were like, how did they do that? Interesting. So they would just cut them very precisely. With trial and error. That sounds exhausting. Wow. And then so they would have an opening in the wall that they were building, and then they would put some wood in there to find exactly the measurements that they needed to fit, and then they would cut the stone in that way. Wow. That sounds insane and exhausting. It's giving me so many ads. Let's look up this, So these are some of the sounds. I do not speak Mandarin. Disclaimer. I know a few, like, words, but, I do not speak Mandarin. So here are the tones. And different languages, Chinese, is not the only group of languages that has tones that differentiate meaning. It's pretty common in, like, Vietnamese history. Me too. History is so cool. And the history of, like, you can do history in anything. You can do the history of language. You can do the history of food. You can do the history of cloth making. Like, everything has a past. And it's so cool to try and figure out these different ones. So I'm gonna look. I'm gonna find this tonal stuff. Don't like history. No, I can tell. You must be so bored right now. So there are, this is like the history of Chinese. Nowadays they're not as, like, there aren't as many tonal changes, but there are still some. Let's see. Pitch contours? Okay, tone letters. So these are, these represent what tone you say a word with. So it's different from singing because there's not a specific pitch. It's relative to where you started. So if I were, one is just, this is the ma. So ma, versus ma. It's ma. And again, I don't speak Mandarin, so this is just my attempt. Or low dipping. So the second tone is like rising. Ma. Low dipping. Ma. Ma. Vena. High falling would be ma. And you just have to hear, like, how the tone changes. which I think there should be some examples here. It is Wikipedia after all. But anyway, so if I were saying ma, that would be mother. But if I were saying ma, I would be saying scold. And again, that's my attempt. I don't speak Mandarin. That could be totally wrong. They have them in Vietnamese as well, like that it matters where you say it. And this is in, I don't know if they have Vietnamese. They do have that in Korean, but again, it's not quite as it used to be. So, tone in linguistics. Oh, there are examples here. Listen, so this is, these are our examples of that word. Well, those 4 words in Mandarin.
Ma,
ma,
ma, ma.
Oh, ma, oh, ma, and ma. They do look pretty, because Chinese still uses a lot of, like, more picture-y characters. There are hundreds and hundreds of characters in Chinese to represent different words, but I don't think most people, like, have to learn all of them to be able to read most things in Mandarin. Oh, so here we are. This is Vietnamese. So Vietnamese has 6 sets of tones. So there's a flat tone where it's just one thing, ngang, which I don't know if I'm saying this right. There's the flat tone, which is where you stay on one tone. The statues on Easter Island. Ooh, I haven't looked much into Easter Island. Or the falling tone. Which is huyen, so it falls here. It looks like they actually measured how people say words with this chart. Oh, there's 5 in Mandarin. You can see it in Thai. Oh, that looks fun. My. I'm probably saying that wrong. That's fun. Man, can you imagine? Like in English, we have tongue twisters that are just the same kind of sounds, but in languages with tones, you can just have the same exact sound over and over in different tones. I would like to hear someone pronounce these. I don't know if they have examples of them. I had a friend who spoke Mandarin, but it was a long time ago. Now he does his own thing. Yeah, I mean, you hear that in any kind of language. There's a lot of YouTube videos. Hi, Premier, how are you? We're talking about phonemes throughout different languages. And we've gotten into tones. It's good to see you, Premier. Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Now I know it's Wednesday. And now we're looking into like how the different... I want to hear some examples. Let me see if I can find one. Because I remember I had a teacher back in middle school who was from Vietnam. And so he would just use the anglicized version of his name, Nguyen. But I asked him once how it was said in Vietnamese. And if I recall correctly, because I was 13, it was the rising. I think it was like Nguyen. So, again, I could be super wrong. So if you speak Vietnamese or another language with tones, let me know. Here we go. So here's that ma sound.
Ma.
Ma. This kind of sounds like you're singing, but that's the flat tone. Bye, Cosme. Adios. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great night. And then we have this uptone.
Ma.
Ma. The descending. So there's 2 different like descending tones. How far back sign language goes. We should look into that next.
Ma.
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 Oh, Ma'a? So that's like where you have the apostrophe between the letters. That's cool. And then this one's literally just called weird tone.
Maha.
Ma. That's crazy. Not in like a bad way. It's just something I'm very much not used to as a native English speaker. Oh yeah. Well, let's look it up. I'm sure the internet has resources. And I mean, there have been people who couldn't hear for a long time. The recorded history of sign language in Western society starts in the 17th century. But hand gestures, we have that as far back as ancient Greece, like you said. But apparently, in the 5th century BCE, who invented it? Well, probably prehistoric people. Probably prehistoric people. That's a good alliteration. But in the, apparently, Socrates mentioned, if we hadn't a voice or a tongue and wanted to express things to one another, wouldn't we try to make signs by moving our hands, head, and the rest of our body, just as dumb people, dumb meaning people who do not speak, not dumb as in unintelligent, people do at present. So it looks like even in 500 BCE, people who couldn't speak would just gesture. And maybe it wasn't standardized like we have it today, but I mean, humans, I think, have been communicating non-verbally since, well, it probably predates language to communicate non-verbally. Because a lot of animals do communicate in one way or another. Like when they taught Coco the gorilla sign language. But she probably wouldn't have been able to speak because she just didn't have the anatomy for it. We have a pretty complicated vocal system. But not only they can produce sound, most other primates can produce sound, but in addition to our very specialized voice box, we also need like a big, busy communication center of the brain. And it would probably be really hard for them, because their brains are developed in a different way. It would probably be really hard for them to comprehend things like grammar and like verb tenses. So they may not be able to understand that well enough to speak English or another language in a way that would be intelligible to us. But lots of animals communicate non-verbally. I mean, we know that like when a dog wags its tail, that usually means that it's happy. Or they'll look in a direction that they want you to see. And I mean, babies even do that. They will look in a direction that they want to indicate, and then they learn to point. Let's see. The first... That would be so terrifying! Can you imagine, like, being some just prehistoric person chilling in the rainforest or the jungle and just, like, living your life, and then suddenly some bird starts talking to you, and you're like, oh wow, the gods are mad at me today. Can you imagine, like, going back to your tribe and being like, this bird talked to me? And they're like, okay, what mushrooms did you eat? That would be so intense, especially because, so, birds have a different voice box than we do, which is why they can often imitate us. Instead of a larynx, they have what's called, like a syrinx that allows them to mimic things way better than we can. Anyway, sign language. The earliest concrete reference to sign language in Britain is from the wedding of a deaf man in 1575. And deaf communities have been using that British sign language since then. And when Britain colonized a bunch of places, they also started using that sign language. Would it be fascinating to see how communication worked by chisel and stone? Are you saying like they would have written in stone? By the time writing really came around, at least as far as I know, the Sumerians are generally credited with being the ones who invented writing, although like it did develop independently in a lot of different areas, like we talked about. Because the idea of preserving communication is actually pretty complicated when you think about it. You can speak, and, for a long time, information was just passed down orally, through stories, through learning. But by the time humans developed writing, at least probably, they were mostly living in cities, at least as far as I know. The Sumerians developed systems of writing to keep records and to communicate, but for a long time, most communication was just verbal. The fact that there are cave drawings of, and I know, and hands, and the hands that, hello, Tiger King, how are you? Oh, it's so sweet. Like, people have always wanted to draw around their hands, or like put paint on their hand and put it on a wall. It's interesting to, like, our hands, which is probably the easiest part of our body to, like, put on a wall. But we still measure our height. We still take imprints of babies' feet when they're born. I'm great. Thank you for asking. Yes, I'm glad you're doing well. But yeah, like, we'd still take imprints of babies' feet, or of children's hands. We actually, when I was little, we made my grandpa, like, a birthday present, where we all put our hands in paint and had a handprint on this, like, apron that had a picture of each of us. And for the babies, like, they're not babies anymore, but for the kids, the grandkids who were babies then, they had to just use their feet, because you just have to dip them in the paint, because it's a baby. What are they gonna do? You just gotta, like, dip the baby in the paint and put it on the on the craft. However, before, still talking about sign language, before the Europeans started showing up to the New World, Native Americans, there's a lot of evidence that they used forms of sign language. A documentary wants a cave painting. Yes! Our handprints. And they're like, same fingers. It's like in Tarzan where they, like, press their hands together. 2 worlds, 1 family. On cement. Trust your heart. Let fate decide to guide these lives we see. Yes, it must be something very human, because we just like to put our handprints everywhere. We like to put things on the walls and say, I was here. This is my hand. I was here. I had a body and limbs. Remember me. Like, we just wanted to make our mark on everything, and I think that's so sweet. Cryptozoa. Yes. Have you read Cryptid Hunters, the series? That's a good series. I haven't read it for years. I never even finished it. I have it right here. And I should really finish that. Yeah, Cryptid Hunters by Roland Smith. Yeah, they did. We looked at the news article about the launch a little bit ago. An unmanned mission. Oh, that's so funny. I just realized that. It's the Apollo, but unmanned. That's perfect. Love that. Yes, yesterday we looked at the article about it. It looks so pretty. It is. Love that we're going to the moon. I love it when we go to the moon. Yeah, sister and brother, they were twins. Weren't they? Leto was their mother. Zeus, as Zeus does. Role reversing their parents. Oh, if I grew up in, like, the 80s, I don't know. I think I would. That would be rough. I'm glad I live now with the internet. Yes. Well, Leto was not a goddess, I don't think. Artemis and Apollo's mother. He came to her in the form of a swan, apparently. Zeus did. And seduced her as a swan. I'm just not gonna question that, I guess, because I don't even know where I would begin. But yeah, Zeus came down to Leto and, yeah. I mean, I grew up watching, I guess Star Trek The Next Generation was more like 90s, early 2000s? You know, it's not the same as it was. I guess I don't know. I guess I listened more to like 90s stuff because my dad likes more modern music. I guess now, maybe he always has been. I guess he's more into jazz now. But maybe he was always into jazz. I don't know. I just remember Yellow and Sour Girl by Stone Temple Pilots. Those were the songs he sang to me, and otherwise I mostly was sung to sleep with like church hymns. I kind of love this milkmaid braid thing. Kind of want to do this more often. It's like a headband, but made of my actual hair. Wait, is one of these? Oh no, that's just baby hairs. My hair is so frizzy. It's the frizziest. It's the frizziest. TNG was 80s, really? Oh, maybe you're right. Maybe it ended in the 90s, and I'm mixing that up. Star Trek TNG. What's the name of what? The TV show? Star Trek: The Next Generation? Or of my hairstyle? Milkmaid braids is what I've heard. More respect and responsibility for life? Why do you say that? I mean, I guess back then they didn't have, like, there's better medical care now. You're right, it came out in 1987. Brent Spiner's been hanging out on Twitter. Braids, yes. It's just two braids and then they cross over each other. Some people can, like, wrap their braids around their head, but I do not have enough hair for that. So I just do two braids and cross them over each other. Oh, I just pulled my hair. Love that. Yeah, I just do two braids and cross them over each other. And that's what I did for my Pinterest hairstyle. More people wouldn't take... Why do you say that? What do you think is different now? I didn't grow up in the 80s, so I don't know how it might have been different. It's this one. But I think they're, smart people and people who maybe don't think about it in every era. There we go. Yeah, it's like a whole thing. I mean, I think that there are people who take things for granted today, and I think that there were people back then who took things for granted. I guess maybe we didn't have the technology back then that we do now. So maybe some things are easier now and easier to take for granted. But I think that there have been people who took things for granted in every era. Like, I don't know. It's people, I feel like people have been saying it was better in the old days for a long time, but I mean, maybe there are people who take more things for granted nowadays. I really don't know. I just know since the days of ancient Greece, people have been saying, like, kids these days, there was lower crime rates, financially more stable. Do you mean, like, in the United States? Because I think crime is actually lower now than it was in the 80s, at least in the United States. Let's see. I'm just going to look up the United States because crime rate USA. Financially more stable. That is true. I think we're in a recession right now, and I don't know if they didn't have those. I mean, they had them, obviously. But the economy, apparently. Okay, let's look up crime rates from 1960s. Violent crime from the 1960s. In 1980, the violent crime rate per 100,000 people in 1980 was 596.6. Looks like it definitely rose in the 90s. And then in the 2000s, wow, it's actually gone way down. In 2018, they only have it until 2018. It's actually below 400 now. Could leave your doors unlocked and sleep with the door open without any issues. I don't know. My dad grew up in the 80s, and he has always been very careful about locking our doors. The violent crime rate has gone down. Let's look at property crimes. In 1980, well, 1981, 5,264. In 2018, it was 2,199.5. So I get where you're coming from, but the crime rates have actually gone way down, according to Wikipedia, at least in the United States. Neighbors were more neighborly. I can get that because back then, especially with nowadays, you can talk a lot more to people far away. So, but without the communication technology we have nowadays, people probably would be more likely to associate with the people who are geographically close to them. So I can definitely see that. Yeah, mobile phones have allowed us to talk to people all over the world, which is really nice. Like, some of my best friends, like the people I talk to every day, we're all in different states. And yet, like, I have never, not never, but like, we're really good friends. And I love them. I'm so glad that I met them. And I probably would have never met them if it weren't for the internet. But yeah, like the people I play D&D with, we all live in different states. So I'm really grateful that we have this technology. And back then, yeah, it was probably more limited to the people in your geographical area. Geographic? Socializing? Yeah, it's nice that I can socialize with people from all over. I can just, like, text my friend, or I can, like, call my grandparents, or, I can talk to people the world over who have had a similar software problem that I had. Like, I'm really happy that I get to widen my range of communication. That's wonderful to me. I don't know. Maybe I just don't know my neighbors very well. I know the ones that, like, I grew up around. But also, most of my neighbors, like, just go to church with my parents. Geographically known for nothing but fields and cows. I had a friend who grew up like that. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like the property and violent crime rates have gone way down since the 80s, which, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that, like, things are becoming safer. At least, these are the statistics from the United States, so, it may be different in other countries. We could look up other countries. Do we have a country we want to look at? I don't know why it looks like that. It's on my screen, so I'm gonna look at the chat. It looks different. It looks like an emoji to me, but on this screen, on my computer screen, it just looks like a Unicode thing. Is that what it's called? History is the best teacher. I don't think someone, like, invented. Maybe they did. I don't know. I think courtship behaviors go back to before humans. So I guess that would be considered, like, the first flirting. How the first emotion. I mean, I bet that predates humanity too. Thank you, Constellation. I don't think emotions were, like, created. I think they're manifestations of our instincts and the chemicals in our brain. Thanks, Panda. I think they also predate humans because you see, like, emotional reactions in animals too. Anyway, but that is our finale for the day. Thank you guys so much for joining me and chatting about linguistics and history. I love these tangents broadcasts. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Have a wonderful day or night, whatever time it is for you. Stay safe, and I will see you soon.